Hi, everyone. Welcome to the latest episode of the All Dolphins podcast, which is on YouTube under that name, All Dolphins Podcast. Also, wherever you find your podcasts, on the Fans First Sports Network under Miami Dolphins Insider. He is Omar. I am Poupart.
And you should have it subscribed by now. Please do that so that you get the updates whenever a new episode is posted. And we will be trying to do episodes at least once a week during the abyss of a dead season until we open up training camp.
Everything that Omar just said. So now we're a week removed. The offseason programs are wrapping up around the NFL. And there will be some business conducted between now and the start of training camp in late July, including possibly one involving Dalvin Cook. Now, Dalvin Cook spoke to Tom Pelissero, who is filling in for Rich Eisen on the Rich Eisen show, and had some interesting comments. And Omar, what did you take from that? You wrote about it on alldolphins.com. And what would you conclude out of those comments?
I think he dropped a couple of tea leaves that are important. One, he's looking for a new home for him and his family, and that's a quote. So this isn't, when you have families and you've got kids, you basically want to settle them into a city. You don't want to live apart from your family and have them visit for game days. I mean, some veterans do that. If you're basically going to be leasing a player, he wouldn't buy a permanent residence. He wouldn't move his family out there. He just have his family visit him during the season. That's not what Dalvin Cook is looking for. So if it's the Denver Broncos and they're only offering him a 1-year deal, he's not looking for that. His family already lives down here in Miami. He basically has a pretty big, extensive family. It's always been, from what I'm told, it's always been a dream of his to play for the Dolphins. So if the money is even close to equal, and that includes Florida taxes, he's going to take a lease offer here. Now, what he's looking for is somebody who's going to give him a multi-year deal. And he's made that, without saying it in so many words, pretty abundantly clear. He's also looking for somebody who wants to make him a featured back. He still feels that he's a featured back. And I would argue to you that he is a top 5 all-purpose back. And when I say all-purpose back, that takes Derrick Henry out the equation because he's really not a third down back. Easily, whether you want to call it all-purpose or just runners, Dalvin Cook is still a top 7 back in the NFL. I find it very interesting that a lot of Dolphin fans will say, well, Mike McDaniel he comes from a system that doesn't use featured backs. Okay, so what did San Francisco do when they acquired Christian McCaffrey? Did they just use him as a platoon back, or did they make him a featured weapon? And that's the argument that I say to the people who say, well, it doesn't fit our system. Then there are the people who say, oh, well, the money, it doesn't make sense. Well, if you add Dalvin Cook to this team and say you remove Gaskin and Savon, you save $2.4 million in cap space. People who say, oh, he doesn't deserve more than a $6 million deal. You gave a $6 million deal to Chase Edmonds, $6 million a year deal to Chase Edmonds. So you're telling me a backup who hadn't established himself in the NFL is worth $6 million a year, but a top 7 back is not worth $6 million a year? I think that it's going to take a $6 million a year offer and a multi-year deal that gives him some injury protection, probably with some incentives for Pro Bowls and yard markers. And if you offer that and put it on the table, a deal gets done. The question is, are you seeing what the market bears?
Well,
you actually have to use words. And I can't just point on a podcast.
You're doing great, Sam. I'm just letting you roll. I mean, I don't need to chime in for the sake of chiming in, but here's the thing is you and I both know teams aren't paying running backs. Josh Jacobs still has a franchise tag that's not signed with the Raiders. Saquon Barkley still has a franchise tag that's not signed with the Giants. We're back to this whole issue of running backs being devalued, and it's great that Dalvin Cook wants a multi-year deal. Is he getting a multi-year deal? It's great he wants injury protections. The truth is he's had shoulder issues the last couple of years, though this is where you chime in and say, well, he still rushed for 1,100 yards at least.
He still rushed for 1,100 yards, 10 touchdowns.
Correct. No,
with shoulder issues.
Don't have to someone how good he is. And when you mentioned top 5 all around back, I have no issue with it. And I saw like people on Twitter throwing in Austin Ekeler. Austin Ekeler is not in that category. Austin Ekeler is a 3rd round back who plays on the field, even though on first down, because forget about getting short yardage stuff.
I was shocked when I started looking up Austin Ekeler. He hasn't even rushed for 1,000 yards.
No. I mean, the yards per carry average is pretty good, but it's kind of like a pretty spread offense where. But no, if you look at the handful of really good all around backs, you're looking at Alvin Kamara, the aforementioned Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey, and I'm sure I'm going to forget somebody very obvious. I don't know.
Nick Chubb. People overlook Nick Chubb.
I mean, how much of a factor is Nick Chubb in the passing game?
He's actually just as much of a factor as Dalvin Cook. I actually had to look that up.
Okay, so there you go. Anyway, there's no question about the quality of player. Dalvin Cook is a stud. The issue is if the contract extends beyond this year, as you and I have discussed.
I think it's going to have to.
Off air, as they say, Dolphins have a lot of salary commitments for 2024. I mean, a lot. And at some point, this is the same issue with Christian Wilkins. He wants $20 million. It's great, awesome. You can't pay everybody what they want. It just doesn't work that way. At some point, you have to make tough decisions. And the question becomes, and this is the same thing, the big key for me for Wilkins is how much do you pay him relative to how he impacts the game?
Wait a minute here. What? I said that like 2 months ago, and people got all in their feelings.
I think I've been with you on this one all along, unless I'm mistaken or I'm getting senile or something. Because
love Christian Wilkins. Is he an impact player? And I say this, and I ask this all the time, and everybody says no, but he's a good guy. He's a locker room guy. He's a leader.
Correct.
You know how many of those guys I've covered over 15 years that the Dolphins have let graduate from their program? Like, the term, I got that from Mike Tannenbaum. They call it graduation. And I'm not saying that Christian Wilkins has to graduate from the Dolphins program. What I am saying is when you equate his 5th-year option, which, understand, Dolphin fans, he's going to make the most money this year on his 5th-year option than he's ever made in his entire career. $10.7 million is his biggest paycheck he's ever made, okay? Divide that up by 17 games. Christian Wilkins is not going to be crying about his salary.
Oh, sorry. I'm going to disagree with you there. He's not going to be happy about it because he's going to look around the league at other young defensive tackles who got paid this offseason, including his former Clemson buddy and teammate Dexter Lawrence with the Giants. He also saw, I have done this here. Ed Oliver got a contract extension. Yeah. Jeffrey Simmons got a contract extension.
Yeah.
Deron Payne got a contract extension, and those guys got paid. And here's the thing, and go again, looking back at next year in 2024, unless I'm mistaken, I counted like 6 guys who have a cap number next year of 20 million or more. That's Tua, Tyreek Hill, Emmanuel Ogbah, Bradley Chubb, Jalen Ramsey, of course, Teron Armstead, and of course I forget the other one.
Howard falls just short. Yes.
And you're looking at what positions do those guys play? Wide receiver, edge rusher, tackle, your quarterback. Those are the guys who impact the outcome of games, not necessarily the guys who the guy who stops the run on first or second down. That's where the issue with Christian Wilkins is. And again, ultimately he's going to get what the market says he's going to get. But the question is there any team out there that's going to value him? Spotrac puts his market value at $19.4 million. To me, that's pretty pricey for a run stuffing guy.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm going to say unless he takes a big step under Vic Fangio in the pass rushing department.
Absolutely. And he could potentially do that. And that's really what they're betting against. You cannot pay everybody, especially the way that your team is financially structured. Whereas if Tua does what I expect him to do and what a lot of people expect him to do, I don't know if Poop expects him to do it. We're looking at he's going to make top 5 salary, which means he's going to eat up about 20 to 23% of the cap. if he gets an extension. That means it's going to be even less money for everybody else that's out there. You're going to have to face some tough decisions, which is why this is really pretty much an all-in season. And if you do get the success that you have, then you kind of figure out a way to make it work. And Steve Ross writes some big fat checks, and then you buy yourself another season. But there's a reset coming. There is a Los Angeles Rams-esque reset coming. You just don't know exactly when, and you don't know how deep Steve Ross's pockets are to buy himself some time. Now, if Tua has the success that he had, that most people are expecting, including myself, then we're gonna what do they say when you're playing? You're gonna double it down. You're gonna double it down on 21. You're gonna double it down. But if you don't have the success that you're gonna have, you're gonna blow it up. I think that when you look at, there's really realistically about $12 million to spend. The Dolphins traditionally use that money as carryover cap, which would benefit them. So I would make the argument to you, nobody gets signed. Now, they're going to add free agents. They're going to add free agents the last week of training, the last week before they go to training camp. They're probably going to add a linebacker. They're probably going to add a nose tackle. They're probably going to add maybe a running back. I'm just saying. I hope it's Dalvin.
Oh, do you have anybody in mind?
Which position?
Running
no,
back.
okay, yeah. I have somebody in mind at all positions, but when you hear Vic Fangio,
whoa, time out. You can't say you have somebody in mind at every position and then move on. Okay, so
I can save it for the next podcast. We got things to discuss here.
Okay, go ahead.
Quan Alexander, my linebacker. But you know, when you hear Vic Fangio say that, hey, depth is an issue, we can watch practice and see the depth is an issue. And when you talk about depth being an issue, as I've said to people, and they struggle to hear this, all you got to do is remove one player from each unit for 6 games, and then tell me, you could pick the player that you want, one starting player. Just pick the starting player, and then tell me how good that unit is. That's how well your team is from a depth standpoint. Whereas unlike last season, are you going to have the luck of being able to sign guys late and claim guys late and then put them in the starting role and they turn out to be Brandon Shell, who you turn your nose up at this offseason? Are you going to have that kind of luck again?
No, but that's the price you pay for having really high-end players and hot big money players.
You're right.
Again, you can't pay everybody everything, and there's a cap, so you can't. This is why when you have a lot of, again, if you have a lot of $20 million a year players,
you can stretch it. You know how you stretch it? And I'll give you the perfect example of how you stretch it. You sign Dalvin Cook to a 3-year deal. The third year is really a dummy year. You give him a $10 million signing bonus, minimum salaries the first 2 years. The third year, you take that cap hit. And basically, he's on the books for about $3 million a season in cap number. But it's going to take fat checks from Steve Ross. Now, you keep doing that, extending players. Like I look at Jalen Ramsey. Jalen Ramsey is going to have to restructure his contract next year. You know, you keep, you know, Xavier Howard, that you're probably going to have to revisit that situation one way or the other. Emmanuel Ogbah, same thing, revisit that situation one way or the other. Jerome Baker, revisit that situation one way or the other. And, you know, if players ball, then they got leverage. If they don't ball, then they don't have leverage.
Correct.
So, you know, the people don't understand these hand pointing things on the podcast.
I mean, you're right. That's a very good point. That's a very good point. I got to stop doing that. When I point my finger at Omar, it means I completely agree with him. That's a good point he made. So
yeah,
what he just said, that makes a lot of sense. But here's the thing.
And Tua, for instance, you could sign Tua and you can give him a $50 million signing bonus and make it a team cap friendly deal for a little while. And then, or you could revisit the contract like they've done with Josh Allen and like they're going to do with Patrick Mahomes every couple of years. So there are ways to work around it, which is why people always get mad at me when I say the salary cap isn't real, because it isn't real. There are ways that you can massage the cap, especially if you have an owner who's willing to write fat checks.
Who's willing to write fat checks. Let me address one quick point with Tua, because you seem to be very eager to throw him a huge contract, which is perfectly fine if he balls out, but also understand And the Dolphins have him under control for next year.
And the franchise tag.
And the franchise tag the following year. So there's no rush to do anything.
Yes.
Correct. There's no rush to do anything with Tua unless and until you're completely, convinced this will be the guy for the next.
I agree with you. Okay. I agree with you. But if he balls out next year, you're benefiting yourself if you sign him to a multi-year extension. And if he balls out, he's not playing on the franchise tag. So the last thing that you want to do is have a dispute contract issue with your quarterback, even though he's Tua and he's going to be a great human being and he's going to play it nice and do it right. I mean, imagine an offseason where your quarterback says, I'm going to be Hawaii all offseason. You figure it out.
No, but I agree with you, but you're talking 2 seasons.
Yeah.
And at that point, if Tua has 2 ball-out seasons in the next 2 years, at that point, absolutely give him the big money extension.
But getting back to the Christian Wilkins things, and I always say to people when they say, this has to be done, it must be a priority. I say, no, it's not. Because you have him at 10.7, and then you have him at the franchise tag the next year, the next year after that, 2024, and ultimately with the franchise tag, which I believe is at 21, and his contract that he's making now, it all collectively comes up to $32 million. That's $16 million a year, which, surprise, surprise, is around what I feel like his real market value is.
Correct.
So that's how I'm playing it. And I think the Dolphins are pretty good when it comes to, I can't sit here and say, outside of free agents that they've lured, that they've signed guys to irresponsible contracts outside of Cedric Wilson, outside of Chase Edmonds, outside of
although in fairness, when they sign,
don't do that.
I am going to do that. When they signed Cedric Wilson, they didn't have Tyreek Hill. Why am I not allowed to do that?
When they signed, are you going to say right now, based on what you've seen for the last 2 years, that Cedric Wilson is even Devontae Parker? He doesn't even have he doesn't have half the skill level as Devontae Parker.
No, I agree. And here's the thing: is I want to apply some nuance here because I'm all about nuance. I wasn't crazy about the Cedric Wilson signing for at the time it happened, even before Tyreek Hill.
Thank you.
But it was done at the time before they had Tyreek Hill, and when the trade for Tyreek Hill was made, which was a no-brainer, it made Cedric Wilson a little bit irrelevant, as it did with Mike Gesicki.
When my peers who cover the Cowboys send me the texts, like, what are y'all doing? like you know like it's like that was our 4th receiver. What are we doing here? Like, you got played, you got suckered into, like, I'm not sure Cedric Wilson isn't a starter on any team in the NFL. And I'm like, why would you pay him $7 million? So let's move forward here.
You're right.
It was just a bad deal. Whether it was Tyreek Hill or not, it was just a bad deal. I'm not even sure he's better than what was the Afro guy that won the Raiders game? Matt Collins. Like, are you certain?
And Matt Collins was a hell of a player on special teams too. And wound up a captain on special teams.
Ability-wise, would you wager your firstborn's life on the fact that Cedric Wilson is better than Matt Collins?
Man, it's pretty drastic. No.
Okay.
Not that I would do it with anybody, but no. If under your hypothetical,
would you wager your firstborn's life that Tyreek Hill is better than Matt Collins?
Yeah, maybe. I get your point. Okay.
Like, so.
Well, here's my thing though. Going back to Dalvin Cook, man, talk about going in a circle here. Ultimately, I think this is what I think is how it's going to play out, and you can tell me if you agree or if you think I'm crazy as usual. That's fine. I can deal with it. Again, like I said, off-season programs around the NFL are ending this week. There's no need for anybody to rush. There's no need for Dalvin Cook to jump on a contract. Mm-hmm. Chances are teams, that's the way the game is played, teams are going to try to get Dalvin Cook on the cheap. He wants to get as much money as possible. I don't think anything happens before the week training camp starts, maybe even a few days into training camp. And ultimately, it very well might be that he doesn't get an offer to his liking anywhere around the league, and he winds up taking a lesser deal than he would have taken to play for the Dolphins.
I think that Dalvin Cook is going to spend the offseason working out with Tua and with the Dolphins crew. He's going to be running Dolphins plays. We all know who he trains with. We all know who trains that quarterback. And he's going to learn the Dolphins playbook. And he's going to eventually get to the point where he's going to wait for an injury to happen and for some team to pull the Jay Cutler desperation button. And when that doesn't happen, I believe he's going to, if it doesn't happen, I believe he's going to say, all right, I'm home. I'm here. I don't have to move. Let's make this happen. And really the only guy who's going to lose in this situation is Devon Achane. And truthfully speaking, and I didn't know this because, as you know, I didn't cover the team. I wasn't in the locker room. I didn't talk to all of these rookies, but talking to them during OTAs and minicamp, all of the rookies, and they were like, man, my head was spinning. This was way too much. I couldn't figure it out. Hey, I'll be better this year. Like the whole class.
Yeah.
And if that's consistent with what they're teaching and what they're doing, it's going to impact this year's class of rookies as well. And I don't really worry about it.
True, except running back is
a 7 plays.
Not really as complicated. Yeah, and it's really not quite as complicated. I think as learning the scheme, like from a wide receiver standpoint, for example, or linebacker in the case of Channing Tindall.
Yeah,
but I agree with the premise that I think Cook sees the Dolphins as that's the fallback plan. That's always as a possibility. Let me see what else. I might keep an eye on the Jets because, again, to me, the Jets have a team that's with really intriguing possibilities. They don't have a lot of depth behind Breece Hall unless I'm missing something. And the guy, as great as he was last year, he's coming off an ACL.
Mm-hmm. That's a very good point.
So I think he represent like a really good,
they have one other back. I'm going to get the name right now once I look up the depth chart.
Michael Carter, but I don't know.
Yeah, Michael Carter.
Yeah,
Michael Carter. So yes, you're right. But let's not. I hate when you.
Let's not pretend you're going to do. Let's not pretend.
I hate when you do that. I will say, let's not act like there aren't going to be 20 backs available when we hit late August. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, but there's backs and there's Dalvin Cooks. I mean, that's kind of a different thing.
Oh, yeah, no, but I'm saying from a depth standpoint, yeah, I hear what you're saying on there's no guarantee that Breece Hall will come back. Breece Hall, like what do running backs always say about ACL injuries? I was much better the second year than I was.
Correct.
So from a physical standpoint, that's a lot of cutting that can impact your style, your running style. Let's get into what I want to discuss on this show, which is I did the offseason superlatives, which is something that I've annually done, for my other employer, the Sun Sentinel. I can say names, and I am curious. I gave my honors to certain individuals, but I want to get Poop's superlatives. Who was your top performer of the offseason program? And before you answer, let me preface this by saying guys who did not work during the offseason, like Jalen Ramsey, I didn't see Jalen Ramsey do anything but individual drills. He did not practice. He was there. Props to him for being there. Tyreek wasn't there most of it. But guys who didn't practice did not enter the superlatives equation. So who was your top performer for the offseason?
But yeah, Omar did the story for alldolphins.com. I believe it was published on Friday. Still, they're very easy to find. Are you going to give your answers before or after I do mine?
After you do yours.
Okay. A couple of guys that stood out to me. Mitchell Agude, the rookie free agent for the University of Miami.
Top performer?
I began by saying guys who stood out to me. Yes, he stood out to me. Okay.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. Liam Eichenberg stood out to me because he was playing at a different position in the practices open to the media. And working at center, and didn't see any issue with the shotgun snaps. Obviously,
didn't look bad.
He looked fine. Obviously, the run blocking is it is what it is in the practice, in the minicamp practice. It's more about body positioning and all that. So there's only so much you can tell. And then the other end, Raekwon Davis on the other side, I actually like the way he moved. I like the way he looked.
Whoa!
If I have to pick one, I think he's the one who caught my eye the most.
So you're giving Raekwon Davis your top performer of the Dolphins?
I believe this is where I would go, yes.
You know what's interesting? I actually considered that, and I didn't give it to him from this standpoint. And here's the 100% Omar Kelly transparency and honesty. Because everybody feels like I hate on Christian Wilkins, I could not ignore and overlook Christian Wilkins. And I don't hate on Christian Wilkins. People don't understand, I like Christian Wilkins.
At the right price.
At the right price. Even Cam would sit there and watch practice, and I'd give plays to other guys, and he'd be like, well, Christian was on that play. And I'd be like, yeah, but because you're really guessing who would finish the play.
Correct.
And a lot of times I would admit that I don't give Christian Wilkins the benefit of the doubt that I would give Jalen Phillips. Like Jalen Phillips, he beats his guy, he slows down. I'm like, okay, done deal. It's yours. Well, Christian Wilkins might have beat his guy and slowed down too. And I kind of lean towards Jalen Phillips because I know that there's history there of finishing plays. But besides that, I gave my top honor to Christian Wilkins. And I felt like, and keep in mind, this is the second straight year I've given him the top honor of top performer in the offseason. And every single season, Christian Wilkins has taken his game up another notch. Every season, and I do expect him to do that again. And yes, I do understand it's going to make him more expensive.
And if he does that, then maybe the $20 million that he'd be seeking is more palatable.
Yes. Who is your biggest addition this offseason? Based on those who participated?
Well, and it can't be the biggest addition, obviously, is Jalen Ramsey. But again, he didn't do teamwork in the sessions open to the media. From what we saw, the guy who jumped
teamwork or 7-on-7s. He didn't do anything.
Correct. So from the work that we saw, Robbie Chosen really jumped out to me. I mean, he really jumped out. I know the guy. I mean, I watched his career. But seeing him at practice, yeah, he was really impressive to me.
Yeah, I and keep in mind, and I said Robbie Chosen as well. Keep in mind, you didn't have Tyreek Hill all offseason. You were kind of pacing Jalen Waddle. So this was a great opportunity for Robbie Chosen and Braxton Berrios and who's that receiver? Cedric Wilson and Eric Uzakama and Sanders. This is a great opportunity for all those guys to step up and raise their hand and say, hey, I'm ready. I'm ready for that call up. And only the guy who didn't know the playbook really did it, which was Chosen. And I was quite impressed. There is no question in my mind that he's the number 3 receiver on this team, unless an injury takes place. Okay, most improved player for Poop goes to who?
Okay, quick point, going back to the other one, is Braxton Berrios. I didn't see him a whole lot in whatchamacallit, in team sessions either. Okay, the most improved, you know what guy I wrote down, because I did some prep work and homework for this? Cameron Good, the guy. And he showed up to me a little bit last summer as well. I remember him, but I was very impressed. I noticed 53 quite a bit in teamwork. That's the guy I did with.
My most improved was Skylar Thompson. And this was pretty much a carryover from last year's training camp and exhibition season. I don't know what happened during the season, but he looks like he's ready to be the number 2 quarterback. Okay.
We're gonna have to move quickly out through the other ones. I didn't see that at all. I actually thought he was better last summer, but that's could be a different topic for another day.
Okay. Most impressive rookie.
The aforementioned Agude, if I mentioned, is one of the top performers. I mean, you couldn't help but notice him.
Absolutely. If he was wearing 50 on the back of his jersey, I mean, if he was wearing Jalen Phillips' number on the back of his jersey, I would have just assumed it was Jalen Phillips. He was that impressive. Let's see what he does when pads come on. As I said in a previous podcast, he reminds me of Chris McCain from just a twitchy, quick athlete who can just get into the backfield.
The important point that needs to be made though here is, again, because of the structure of minicamp practices with no pads and all that, if you're a defensive lineman who gets off the ball quick and you're going to go all out, it's kind of easier to like shine because the offensive tackle is not going to start.
Especially when you're not going against any offensive tackles. Because Correct. If he was doing this against Teron Armstead, I'd be like, whoa, Nelly, we got something here. He was doing this against Joe Schmoes.
Other players.
Area of concern for you is what?
Backup quarterback. I mean, it's not.
Really?
That's to me, that's 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, 1E. You were a lot more impressed with Skylar than I was. I told Mike White is a much better game player than he is a practice player.
Let's hope that's true.
Let's hope that's true. To quote somebody, Dolphin fans should know I'm a little queasy about the backup quarterback position.
My area of concern is linebacker depth. There is none there. It's just piss poor, and that's clearly an area that they've got to address. Yes, David Long wasn't working. Yes, Channing Tindall wasn't working. But I think you're one player light in that unit. Area of strength for Poop is what?
There's no way for me to just pin one down because there's two areas where the Dolphins are at or near the top of the league, and that's wide receiver and cornerback, and which are two good positions to have. I mean, they're completely loaded at both spots.
I don't know if I'm saying loaded at cornerback, but I mean, any unit where Noah has to make it on the roster.
He may or may not make it on the roster, though. Because I think Cater Kahu as a 3 is pretty good. I mean,
yeah. Then you got Nick Needham when he comes back. Then I don't know what's going to happen with Trill Williams. I'm curious to see what happens with Trill, what happens with Nick. Okay. Biggest surprise of the offseason to you was what?
Actually, spoiler alert, but you and I had the same one. Both in terms of seeing where he lined up and both seeing in how he performed. It was Liam Eichenberg. It was like,
yeah.
First time I saw him, I was like, what hell's he doing there? And he looked the part.
Yeah, he looked the part. No, I would say he's better snapping at this point in his transition than Connor Williams was. And I don't know if he had snapping experience in his past at Notre Dame, but
he did not. He was asked that question and they said never played center before.
Yeah, it looks like a very natural transition for him. I really don't know what's. I would kind of open up the competition. I'm curious. And remember the practice where the Raekwon Davis and Liam Eichenberg fight? That was a carryover from the previous day where Eichenberg and the whole O-line just burrowed and bullied the Dolphins D-line in a run-specific day. And I was like, wait a minute, y'all can do this without Teron and Connor Williams? What's up here? Like, maybe we have something here. One player pushing for playing time for Poop is who?
It's funny because we're talking about the cornerbacks and there's one name you never mentioned. Cam Smith. I would tell you I saw enough glimpses in coverage. Again, this is minicamp practices, no need to overreact, but I saw a couple of things in coverage that told me, yeah, this guy's got something. I think he's got to carve out a role because again, you got Howard and Ramsey, and then Caterco, who's is a pretty good number 3 at this point. I think Cam Smith could push for a role as a rookie.
Here's what I liked about Cam Smith. There are certain positions where you shouldn't notice them in practice, and if you do, there's a problem. Cornerback and offensive line. If you do notice them, that means they're getting beat a lot. I only noticed Cam Smith for knockdowns that he created. I didn't notice him getting.
Same here.
And that's pretty impressive. I would have to agree with you. And maybe he was a top rookie performer, but Mitchell Gude, that boy was looking bad right there. So that's your
pick. Wasn't your pick. That wasn't your pick, though.
I know it wasn't my pick, but you're right. He looked pretty solid. Needs the most work.
Yeah, you and I are on the same page on this one also. It's Channing Tindall. Third round pick last year. It'd be nice for the Dolphins got something out of him, particularly since, as you mentioned, the off the ball linebacker area it needs some depth, and
it's piss poor. Am I lying? It's bad.
Well, we don't know yet because we haven't seen David Long Jr. So I don't know that you need 7 of them. And remember, they also are experimenting with Andrew Van Ginkel at off the ball linebacker. So that's 4 guys. Still, it would be nice if Channing Tindall was able to make a contribution in his second year after basically
redshirting.
Pretty much, yeah.
And I've got a story on him coming out on alldolphins.com. Biggest mystery to you about the 2023 Dolphins?
Oh, man, there are a lot of them. The couple I pointed out here is, what exactly do the Dolphins have in Trill Williams? I'm very, very intrigued by this guy. I think there's something there. But you and I both looked at him when he was on the field, even though he didn't work. But, damn, that dude is built. And then the other one I have is, what do the Dolphins do with Cedric Wilson? Do they end up eating the money that's going to have to count? It's going to have to count against the cap anyway. Do they sacrifice the roster spot or just bite the bullet?
Hell no. He's on my roster. He's never playing, but I'm not eating $5 million just because I feel like it. Like, just because I need to keep Braylon Sanders. Because I need to keep Braylon Sanders or River Craycraft. I'm eating $5 million.
How many wide receivers are you keeping?
6. So
he's your 6th.
Yeah, he's my 6th. And I'm keeping Sanders and Craycraft on my practice squad. Like, somebody claim them, they claim them. But I'm not eating $5 million just because I made a mistake as a GM. My GM made a mistake. No. Now, I will trade him for a pack of bubble gum and some Cheetos.
They might trade a 3rd-round pick and Wilson to get a 7th-round back just to get rid of his contract. But
I'm on board with that.
I don't dismiss the possibility that at some point they'll decide the roster spot's more valuable than not eating the money. But I don't think it's a slam dunk. That's why you asked me the biggest mystery.
My biggest mystery is tight end. I don't see anybody stepping up so far, and that includes the starter. And I'm not expecting them to be a 50 target kind of position, but it would be nice to have 2 good ones. And it's early, no pads are on, so we shall see.
So to me, there's no mystery at tight end. It's going to be a couple of guys will get 25 to 30 catches. Hopefully they convert 3rd downs and they do the blocking they're asked, and the offense, the passing game goes to the wide receivers and the running backs. So I'll throw in one last time. We're running out of time here, but I'll throw in one last one as a mystery is, how does the offensive line shape up in terms of a starting 5? Because I thought all along it was pretty clear it was going to be Armstead, Eichenberg, Williams, Hunt, and Jackson. Does Isaiah Wynn fit into the mix somewhere? Is Eichenberg at center even remotely a possibility? I still think the original 5 stays the same, but now let's say I'm 90% sure as opposed to 100% sure when we got into the offseason program.
All right. Well, it was a good podcast. We will see you next week.
What Omar said.